see how we're doing here. Let's get Blickman in there. I'm not sure about the setup today, you guys. I think I have everything I have. I think I have everything I need. What's good, people? What's usually I'm a little more organized. Believe it or not. Usually I'm a little bit more organized. But I think I'm in good shape here. Can you hear me loud and clear here in the chat, everybody? All right, I've got 2 beverages. The Blickman thing is in the background, loud and clear, says Homebrew 6829. Let me just make sure I don't have anything else coming in here, and then we're going to get rolling here in just a moment. Yeah, my picture is mirrored for some reason. Oh, what are you going to do? You still got the fire. You can still see if I lean all the way over here, you can't see the light on the fireplace from my light setup. Got a few people in here. Welcome, everybody. That works. All right. I've had more and more comments about the mug. It's one of my favorite things. Let me just minimize my windows here, you guys. Champions of the chat. And we're going to get rolling here. For all of you in the chat, as always, drop questions as you have them, and we will get them as time allows here. All right. Well, listen, let's fire up, everybody. Hey, good afternoon, evening, morning to you. Welcome to Adam Makes Beer. My name's Adam. If you didn't know, Adam Makes Beer is now a podcast. Check out Spotify, Apple Podcast, and see all of the long-form brewer interviews that we have done. After you subscribe, please leave a rating and review, because this really helps me out as far as people finding the information, the podcast. So that's a big help. Only takes a little bit of your time, but I would really appreciate you doing that. Also, if you are new to the channel or podcast, go to Adam Makes Beer on YouTube. Click the playlist tab and see tons of info, brew days, techniques, tutorials, and over now 480 videos that are now live. 480 videos, baby. We'll have 500 by the end of the year. It's kind of crazy. As always, if you are getting value out of this content, please follow, rate, like, comment, and share with your brewing friends and craft beer enthusiasts, folks that you know. And if you have the means and feel as if my content has benefited you, consider a channel membership for $2.99 a month. It does give you the benefit of priority for getting questions answered on this very live stream Q&A. Or drop me super chat tips in the comments during the chat. That is all very much appreciated. I had a great time on the Mo Hedgehaw podcast as well as the Beersmith podcast, both last weekend. Knocked those off back to back. That was a lot of fun. The Beersmith podcast is ready to go right now. Pardon me. we have a long-standing cold that has been going on in the Mills household. So please be patient with me through this podcast if I sound a little off from time to time. But I had a blast on the Mo Hedjaw podcast. That was a lot of fun. This was one of those podcasts where really it was just like, well, I mean, I was a guest on their show, and so it was them asking stuff about me. It's definitely some beer talk, but it also ranges into I don't know, a lot of different topics. I had a great time with Ant and the guys. Really, what I enjoyed about it is Ant is a great conversationalist, knows how to cue you for conversation, how to follow up with questions. It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that one getting out there. So if you have not followed Mo Hedjaw on Instagram, do yourself a favor and do that. They have some cool stuff. They do beer reviews, a bunch of different cool things. So check them out on Instagram. Give them a follow. When you do, send them a message. Tell them how much you loved the podcast with Adam Makes Beer. And that's not dropped yet, but when it does, please wait until the podcast drops before you tell them how much you loved it. And then I also sat down and talked with Brad Smith, man. You know, it's cool because I've been using Beersmith since I first got into the industry. I was a Pro Mash guy when I was brewing at home, and then I purchased my Beersmith membership, and I've been using that for like the last 13 years. My username is still actually like a brewery that I used to work for back in the day. So yeah, I think maybe I updated that, but you know, it's it's a great software. It was cool talking with Brad, sharp guy. We had a good conversation about thiolized yeast. And so, yeah, it's another one you should check out. That one is already live. Brad is on his grind, man. He's got that thing posted. Brad is already rolling, and he's got that thing posted both on his website and on YouTube. So get over to Beersmith on YouTube. Check that episode out. Please leave a comment. Tell Brad, thanks for having me on. I'd appreciate it. Yeah, it was just a good time, man. It was a good time. What else? Response has been positive for a recipe tutorial course. Life is very, very busy right now, and so I continue to have feedback coming in about that. One of the things I'm looking into is I'm trying to figure out the way in which I want to make that content available, because what I want to do is I don't want to do it through YouTube. So I don't want to have it be done through a YouTube membership. I would rather treat it like a one-time transaction. And I know that you can do things like that with Patreon and a host of other, you know, probably more relevant ones today. I know there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'm still wading through all of that. Maybe my son, when he gets home for Christmas, he might be able to help me set up a website. And maybe on that website, I can have like some paywall individual content that I can sell on there. So it's a one-time purchase, and then you just gain access to that video forever. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm looking forward to it. But life and work and everything is very busy right now. So we'll see how that goes. But that is still in the works. Something I'm very excited about is it looks like I'll be doing a special Industry Pro podcast with big Josh Halpert, also Toft, Joshua Toft, head brewer at Cartridge Brewing. We might just be sitting down. He took a trip to England recently, and I would like to sit down and talk with him about his kind of unique trip that he took, his experience with cask beer and British beers, He just brewed what I'm sure is going to be a killer robust porter, and we might be sipping on that. So yeah. And I think we're going to do this one live, like on location with a fire, with some beverages, maybe some low grade tobacco. You never know. It could be very exciting. So we'll see if we can work out the logistics. The video quality might not be the best for this one, but we might be streaming from a special location. This might be the first time. Well, it will be the first time that I have two people. Like I'm one camera, recording two people for a show. I'm gonna have to see if my buddy Andy knows how to edit out all these coughs, like with his magic wand. He has a magic wand when it comes to this stuff. When I edit these videos down, it takes me forever. Andy edits all 2 hours in like 4 minutes. I don't know how he does it. But anyways, there is that. But listen, you are not going to want to miss this conversation with Josh Toft, head brewer over at Cartridge. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. We are waiting for that beer to get into package. So I'm going to be holding on to the release date for that, but that will be a November podcast. So that will be the next thing that you see coming up. And what else? Earlier today, I was at the Sonder 5-year anniversary party. Pretty exciting stuff. They had a lot of killer beers that they released. They had some gorgeous barrel-aged beers. They had barrel-aged Otto, maybe even double barrel-aged double barrel-aged barley wine. It's cool because we've just been brewing these beers. Like we brewed Otto, their Imperial Stout, and they do variations thereof that beer, but we've brewed that. But a lot of these beers that are going into these special releases, these big that are going into bottles, they're 1 to 2 years old, and they've got some age on them. They're beautiful beers. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. We had a big old line behind the brewery today for people queuing up to get all of their specialty anniversary beers. We did that. That party is still going right now. So I mean, it's a little late in the day. It's already 6, but I don't know. Cheers to everybody who stopped out and said hi. That was awesome. And it was a really good time. So what else? Let's see what we have going on in the chat. We have Homebrew 6829. Shout out to you. Just became a brewer's apprentice. We appreciate the support. Also, we have Channel Champion, September and June, back in the house. What's the difference between a chickpea and a lentil? Dude, I don't know. The real question is, what is the difference between a chickpea and a garbanzo bean? I'll tell you that right now. Nothing. It's the same thing, baby. Garbanzo bean is just chickpea with an Italian accent. I can say that because I'm Italian. There's also I'm a brewery in the house. Hey, Adam. Hope you have a great one. I'll make myself comfortable jumping in if I can think of anything. Yeah, pop those questions in. Brookside Brewing Company popping off as a brewer's apprentice. Loving that. Thank you so much for the support. Matt Mustaine. Hey, yourself, man. How you doing? It's good to see everybody in the chat. Keep those questions coming in. Here's the deal. September and June, you're in rare form. All right. And you got me. And I didn't see that coming at all. Am I reading the punchline out loud so that listeners can hear it? Absolutely not. How dare you, sir? Just kidding. But hey, listen, before we dive too far into it, let's talk about our fantastic sponsor. Bligman Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams since they started with 1-barrel systems in 2006. now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15 barrels skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more, sized specifically for the nano brewer. Blickman Pro brewing systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality, and the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts get you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. Yeah, September and June is slang in the chat. It's he's slaying in the chat, man. He's killing it. But yeah, we have a bunch of questions coming up today, everybody. If you do have those questions, drop them in the chat. And in the meantime, we're gonna be getting into the thing here. I should have known that was the lead into a joke. How I did not know that was the lead into a joke, I don't know. September. Shame on me. Shame on me. Actually, let's do this. First question is from Vincent in the chat. I used to homebrew on gas, then induction, and now use elements. I've noticed with elements, I get much lower malt intensity at the same gravities. Is this common? Lower Maillard reaction, perhaps? Yeah, man. I think that's a real. I think that's a real possibility. Of course, we're going to say that, all other things constant, right? So if you're talking about the Munich Helles that you've brewed before on these, like the standard house recipe, your house pale ale, your house IPA, your house blonde ale, things like that, and you've been running that beer, that recipe the entire time, it, and then you see here that you're getting something different out of it, and in this case, quote unquote lower malt intensity. I think sometimes we can overlook things like that, and heating in particular. On the pro side, we tend to see either direct fire or steam. Steam is a gentler heat, which can potentially reduce the amount of Maillard reactions or browning reactions that can happen in the kettle. Maillard reactions are great. They can add depth. That's what we're talking about when we talk about melanoidin type malts, different things like that. Sometimes like a toastiness. Sometimes people even talk about like a little bit of like a caramely type thing. But there can be a depth with that, as you mentioned. And I would say, yeah, if you're in a situation where with the electric elements, and he says now uses elements, I would have maybe thought that with the elements that you're using, maybe those elements are ripping really hot, and then you're driving these Maillard reactions. But maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe the intensity of those coils is actually lower than the intensity of your other heating sources that you've used in the past. And so, yeah, maybe you're getting a little less Maillard reaction out of your boil, a little less color, a little less flavor development out of it. And I would say that's really possible, man. I think that's a pretty good way to approach it. Again, assuming all other things constant, same malts. And actually, Vincent, you're welcome. I feel fine. I just have kind of like this, and honestly, all day I haven't even really had this cough. Like, it's just I've been feeling great. I was sick last week, but I'm actually fine right now. But yeah, man, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. So appreciate you jumping in the chat, and appreciate asking the question. All right. All right, all right. Next question is from Lake Moran Brewing on YouTube. Hi, Adam. I'm looking at malting grain from the farm commercially in our region. Is there anything you wish your maltster would do differently, whether it be the malt styles or a way COA is presented? What do you look for when choosing your maltster to go with? Cheers. Well, Lake Moran, I'm the kind of brewer that I buy raw materials for flavor and aroma, like we all do, hopefully. Cost typically is not number one on my mind when I'm thinking about things like this. It can be, and it probably should be when you're doing it professionally. I would say that you can probably get away with cheaper, less expensive base malt with beers that are going to be adjunct forward. So for me, if I'm going to be making a big IPA hop bomb, I'm not going to spend on top of the line base malt for that. That's just me. I want to get the malt out of the way anyways. If I'm making a tart little fruit beer where I want it to be kind of this tart fruit bomb, I'm not going to be investing heavily on my base malt. If I'm making German beers, I'm really going to invest in it. If I'm making British beers, I'm really going to invest in it, and I'm going to spend out on that stuff. Because big picture, it is still inexpensive. If you're in a pub situation, cost really isn't the issue. I mean, I think that might be brewer perspective, but especially if you're making a malt forward beer, I mean, malt's the cheap side of the equation. My biggest issue with using local is consistency and quality. So I'm not saying that local isn't consistent, and I'm not saying that it's not quality, but that's my number one thing. If I am spending down on malt or spending up on malt, I want to know what I'm going to be getting every time. I might use, if I was in a situation where I had a pilot system, I might trial out some smaller stuff, but from some stuff from smaller providers, raw material providers. But to be honest, I never really have. I have not done a lot of base malt trialing, different things like that. I've kind of just followed the path that I just mentioned before. So for me, if I were getting into what you are looking into, and you are trying to sell it to me, I would want to see quality, consistency, so I know exactly what I'm getting. Right. The last thing I want to do is buy your malt, spend a whole bunch of money on hops, fruit, or X, Y, and Z, and then have the malt not perform and be a negative for me in that beer. And then I'm sitting on, 15 to 30 barrels of beer that I don't want, you know. So anyways, I mean, that's my take on it. Some other guys on the pro side of the industry might have various opinions on it, but that's where I sit with it. So yes, thanks Lake Moran Brewing for the question. Next question is from 3RW Parks 3 on YouTube. I've been brewing for about 9 years. After watching Brew School, which is a series I have, I believe we were brewing Munich Dunkel. In that one, it's a good time. My buddy Dustin is in house, and he's recording me. And it's probably one of the first series where I feel one of the first brew day series where I feel comfortable doing my thing, and I think it helped having Dustin there because he's a fun guy. He asks good questions, and I've known him forever, so. It was a lot of fun. And that's also a reminder for all of you that are newer to the channel that don't know, there's tons of jump into the playlist. There's brew days, tutorials, all sorts of things back there. The back catalog is very strong, if I do say so myself. So he was watching, Parks was watching Brew School. I realized how close my brewing technique is to a professional's method. I started extract brewing and then moved on to a combination of extract and grain. Eventually, I went to all grain. This has happened. This all happened within the first year of brewing while accumulating my equipment. In the process, I moved through various stages: water additions, pH, better equipment, CO2 transfers, and conditioning. My last step and much needed step is more controlled fermentation temperature. After seeing the pros do it, I am very happy with my brew house garage. I now know I'm doing it the right way. Great videos. Well, first of all, thank you for all the kind words. That's really very nice of you. Like I said, that brew school series in particular was probably the first time I did something that I felt really good about, that I posted on YouTube. So that's a fun one. You should check that out. It's informative, and we had a good time shooting it. But you mentioned kind of that progression as a home brewer. There's a lot of different reasons for making beer at home. Some people want to make beer so they can drink beer. Some people want to pick it up as a discipline, fun for a hobby. You are, the chef cook type, right? Or you are the equipment and gadget guy, right? There's plenty of different ways that you can angle at this hobby. And one thing I do want to mention is, yeah, I mean, it sounds like your list of things that you're doing well. That all sounds great, And but what I will say is, I think sometimes there's a miss. Sometimes I think there's this notion that if a pro is doing something, that's what you should be doing, and in some cases that can be, but just because somebody is doing it professionally doesn't always mean that their processes are the tightest. That goes for me as well. I'm constantly learning and evolving my practices, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. But I mean, the big picture of the whole thing is just enjoying that growth, enjoying that process, and just, I don't know, sticking with it and having fun with it. You know, I When I was home brewing, for me, I was very equipment lean, and I was very focused on cheap ways that I could make the best beer I could. So I was fortunate because I had a cold Michigan basement, which was basically like 55 degrees almost year round. And so all I had to do was bring my carboy to the basement, put a heating wrap on it that was on a Ranco temperature controller, and it was constantly pushing the temperature up. So temperature control was really easy for me. I mean, the main thing I invested in was growing up appropriate yeast cultures, fermentation, and cleaning and sanitizing. That was the nuts and bolts of what I really focused on at home, and it paid off a lot. So I'm glad you're getting value out of the videos. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. So cheers, man. Back in the chat, Andrew in the chat. What's up, brother? What is your approach with all these experimental hops coming out these days? Well, I will say this. I was just on the phone a couple weeks ago with the beautiful and illustrious Andrew Gallagher, head brewer of Linwood Brewing in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you have not been, you need to. They've got some great stuff going on, and Andy and Bill are great guys, dear friends of mine. So Andy and Bill just went out to Yakima for hop selection. And he was just talking to me about the really impressive process they have for hop selection, the way they utilize data there. Really interesting stuff. I might need to see if I can get Andy to come back on and chat with me at one point, pretty much just to talk just to talk hop selection because it was pretty interesting. You know, me personally, I don't think I am. I think it's one of my skills that is a little bit lagging is in the hop sensory side of things. I mean, obviously there's the straightforward answer of, using it, right? Um, obviously if you have a pilot system, you can do some things like that. I might even suggest I've heard of people taking some things and like going ahead and filling up a growler, purging a growler with beer. And this is kind of on the pro side what I'm talking about because we're talking about having a volume of beer to play with. But taking your house blonde ale or a lighter beer and look at scaling that down to that half-gallon size, that 64-ounce container, 32-ounce container, whatever it is that you're putting it in, and scaling what your dry hop might be into something like that at 1 to 3 pounds per barrel, whatever you want to try with a hop like that, and scaling that down to the half-gallon side. Get those hops in there, purge. Maybe you actually want to purge, fill it, and then throw the pellets in. I'm not sure which way it's going to foam more. It's probably not going to be pretty either way. But and give those a few day contact time in that vessel, and then decant and give that your a way to test your dry hop a little bit. That can be a way that you can process some of those things. Obviously, you can get brewers cuts, whole cone samples cut directly out of bales that will be sent to you, and you can do sensory on those hop rubs. I do have a video with me and Big Josh Halpert doing a hop rub from Crosby. So that's on the channel. Check that out. That might be like in the tutorial playlist section, but just dig around and you'll see that there. It should be some yeah, it should be in there and be a little bit informative. But that would kind of be the first way. And then again, it's always about exposure. So I would say, doing hop rubs are not guaranteed avenues of telling you how they're going to express in the final beer, but at least you can start building up some, I don't know, some notion as to what you're working with. But yeah, I think I might need to get Andy on and we can talk about his experience with that because that was pretty amazing. So yeah, so cheers to you and appreciate the question. Hey, and big tip of the hat to Paul, and please tell me because I'm going to say Bondi, man. All right, Lich Spooned indeed, coming through with a super chat for your boy. I appreciate it. Always appreciated. Listen, these kids got to eat, man. I mean, every one of these things. I got a lot of kids. They're out there. They're out there right now clamoring for food. So you're filling small bellies with those tips that you're dropping in the chat. So we all appreciate it. Next question. Oh, let's see here. Okay, so I'm a brewery. I'm gonna ask a little bit of a question here, and then what I'll probably do is I'll probably come back and answer as much as I can. So just off the top, I am not the best when it comes to some of these enzyme questions, but it's something that I'm working on. So I'm a brewery. Hey, Adam, I am between amylo glycosidase and another mixture of 3 alpha amylase, protease, and bioglucanase. Which one would you choose and why? Because for me, they both make the job done. Extraction. So you're looking to increase extraction with those. I'm not exactly sure on that. I will say that I've been using bioglucanase, both in beers with a lot of oats and beers with an elevated level of roast malt, because let's face it, ladies and gents, we are in stout season. So I have found that it's helped in running off of some of those beers. So I might not. I'm probably gonna have to dig on that one, and then put that one off for another live stream, dude. And we'll make it happen. So yeah, appreciate it, Bobby F. What's up yourself, dude? Glad to hear. Glad to see you in the chat. Spooning and Vert back in this piece. It's time for the spooning to commercial to commence. The spooning should be commencing. I've been spunding like you wouldn't believe, baby. You don't even know. Next question comes from Adam Makes Beer on YouTube. I had a sassy comment over on Instagram when I posted about the video on experiencing a little bit of imposter syndrome with my new job at Sonder Brewing. It brings to mind a new book I'm listening to. There's a book called Hidden Potential that I'm listening to by Adam Grant. For those of you that listen to stuff like that, I originally found Adam Grant by listening to Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek has maybe one of the all-time top listened to viewed TED Talks on YouTube on finding your why. I think it's a really valuable talk, really, regardless of, I mean, this isn't brewing specific, but I think it's a good career specific practice or exercise that he introduces there. Really good stuff. So I found Adam Grant through that. And in that video, when I was talking about imposter syndrome, I was talking about some of the challenges of starting at Sonder. The automated system, larger automated system that I had not used before. That stuff doesn't come native for me. That takes a little time for me to learn. The fact that everything's in metric is a change. They have very well defined SOPs. They have some process opportunities I have not had before in the past, whether it be a sterilization loop, a CIP skid, just a lot of different things. So to be honest, I was feeling, and especially when I was really diving into full-time learning the brew house, I was feeling a little overwhelmed. I mean, I knew that it was going to come together. I've been doing this for a while, and it just takes time. But I started listening to this book, man, Hidden Potential. And I'm not going to recommend it or anything. I'm only like 2 chapters in, but they mentioned something really interesting, and I wanted to pass it along to all of you. This is not so much brewing, but just a little bit more life career type stuff. And you know, this stems directly out of what's coming out of my brewing career right now. He talks about people that are polyglots, people that have the ability to speak, read, write multiple languages, and they just seem to pick it up and things like that. A lot of the stuff that they talk about in the book is very highly research-based, everything like that. I believe he's a psychologist. So a bunch of research-based stuff. But they started digging in on these people that could speak multiple languages. And they said something that I found really, really interesting and has been really, really motivating for me the last few days since I listened to it. And I think it's going to motivate me going forward for a little bit. One of the people that was diving into this practice of learning multiple languages, he said that his goal was to make 200 mistakes a day in speaking the language. And the idea behind that is having it being twofold, right? One, when you make mistakes, you end up finding out and knowing what you have to correct. But 2, you desensitize yourself to the embarrassment of making mistakes, because ultimately it's making those mistakes that is leading to the learning. So case in point, Ecos. I don't know how many of you out there have had to use Ecos. I am by no means an ecos wizard. I have in my career hired people to work for me that would do really, really well in ecos, and I have avoided it. The book also talks about that when people talk about procrastination, that it's not so much about laziness, is it's about avoiding the feeling of failure or discomfort that comes from engaging in something that you're not good in. That may not apply to you, but that applies 100% to me. That is exactly how I feel about the whole thing. Um, so just the other day, just on Friday, I just had to dip my toe into the Ecos waters. And I decided that, listen, I'm just going to get in here. I'm going to make my mistakes so I can learn, and I'm not going to feel bad about it. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm just going to lean in, take the lumps, and then actually become proficient in it. So that's where I'm at. I'm still no Ecos wizard. I did learn how to input my ingredients for my brew day, which is not like it was any large feat or anything like that. But yeah, that's kind of uh hopefully there's a little nugget in there for you with something that you have going on or have had going on in the past. I'd be interested to hear in the comments. So drop that stuff beneath if you have any experience with that or any thoughts on that. So yeah, appreciate the question, Adam Makes Beer on YouTube. All right, I'm going to jump off screen real quick. You can grab a refill, bathroom break, or whatever you need, and we will be right back. And just like that, we're back. I've got a little in the Adam Makes Beer mug in the official Brew Daddy mug with my face on it. I get more messages about this mug than you might think, but it's a little coffee, but it's fall, baby. So we're going a little wild. I've got a little bit of the Swiss Miss in there. You know what I mean? A little bit of chocolate, hot chocolate mix, maybe a little splash of bourbon. We're getting wild. It's not very cold. It's a relatively warm fall day here, but listen, I mean, I've got insulated shirt, flannel. It's flannel season, baby. So yeah, let's dip back into the chat here real quick. Spoonding. It is pronounced spoonding. Also, Alamo Kid. I'm a brewery in there. Prus. Welcome. Lagers are the future. I don't disagree. Mm. I'm a brewery. Let me try this one on a roll at the moment. What do you think about dosage rates and residence time of spices, cinnamon, ginger, orange peel in winter Christmas ales? What I would do is you have a couple of options. Okay. What I would do is I would start off when you can with some of those things with some hot side additions, whether you bag them up and have them hung in the whirlpool, and then get your beer through fermentation, and then uh, get it cold and what, or be able, get the yeast out of it as much as you can, draft the yeast, sample that, and see where you're at, and see what you want to continue to dose into that beer. I've seen some, there's some cool ways in order to do that. If you're talking about on the pro side, you could bag something up and transfer it into a bright tank or another tank that's purged, bag it up, circulate it with a pump, bubble it up from the bottom. And then really what you're doing is you do want to rouse that, because you could just have a situation where all of your extraction is kind of sinking to one layer of the tank. And so you want to circulate that. Not only will that facilitate extraction, but it'll make sure that you have a homogenized mixture. And then you're sampling from there. And what you're going to find is you're going to find, kind of your range. Not a cop out answer, but just more a way of looking at techniques that you can use to dial in, because ultimately you're going to want to, I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all, because dosage rate comes in. The fact that, we're talking about agricultural products, so the intensity of them could be on various levels. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs to it. So, but those are some of the things that I would do in order to approach that. So yeah. From Paul Bondi. Hey, Adzi, you madman. Question: how do you leave your transfer hoses when not in use? Just with the little plastic caps on, or open to the air? Would you ever leave them packed with Sani, triclover, and end caps? So I'll say this: when I first got into the industry, I would almost always hang them packed with paracetic acid. That's not something that I do anymore. I do leave them completely stripped down. In an ideal situation, you're not just hanging them over the ladder rack on your fermenter, because with doing like a really hard U shape, you can end up impacting the integrity long term of the inside of the hose. They do recommend storing them on a more gentle arc if you can. So I've seen some people that will have like a couple of racks mounted to the back of their fermenters. So rather than just having one fermenter where it's hanging up and going straight up and down, to where you can hang them on an angle like this, so water will still drain out of them. I mean, big picture, either way, whether you're going to be transferring a beer or whatever, more than likely you're going to need to run caustic and or at least acid or at least sanitizer on whatever application you're going to be using next. So I wouldn't worry too much about knocking those things out. Worrying about something getting into them. If they're clean and allowed to hang dry, I think that's fine. I don't think you need to leave them sealed up like that. That's one thing that I've changed from my time earlier in the industry. So appreciate the question, Paul. Spooning of Vote thought that the children were our future. You couldn't be more wrong, dude. You couldn't be more wrong. That's what I have, this heart in the way here, and I can't see. That is what Whitney said. Whitney said that before she became under the influence of Bobby Brown's prerogative. What else? Anything else in here? I think that is. Andrew, please just don't let cold IPAs and Nelson Sauvin be the future. How dare you, sir? How dare you, sir? Hey, oh, indeed. Next question comes from Vic. Vic on YouTube. Listen, I do the best I can to pronounce names, and I actually try to sometimes I don't know if I'm receiving a name from outside of my culture that I am not familiar with, or if it's just an amalgamation of people's full names or abbreviations and stuff. But I do try to be respectful. I do not try to not be a jerk when it comes to things like that. But sometimes I just have to shorten them up. So Vic, here you go. Just subscribe. Thanks. Thank you. Did you start as a home brewer? Oh goodness, whoa, hitting the mic. Did you start as a home brewer? Did you have any sort of beer fermentation diploma that are out there? Just curious to know. Answer no. I learned everything I know from the School of Hard Knocks, baby. All right. No, in all honesty, I am from I am from the School of the Brewing Network. That was really my introduction and the super majority of my education in this field. Obviously, there's so much that comes from experience, repetition, everything like that. But I can easily say like my fundamentals as a brewer comes from being an avid listener of the Brewing Network. Um, Probably, I mean, I probably listened to every single bit of content they released from the beginning through at least 2011 or 2012. It is a wealth of information. I would say that I mean, killer pro interviews on there. Some of the shows are longer and more conversational. Some of them are are shorter. But and I get not everything is everybody's cup of tea. But that's where I cut my teeth, man. I learned I learned just about everything from there. And so and there are some other books and whatnot along the way, but no, I did not receive any certification. I my resume was my aggressive participation in homebrewing competitions, utilizing a shock and awe methodology of entering a lot of beers into competition. When I was homebrewing, I really only brewed for competition. Was something that made me a little bit different than some of the other folks out there. And a reasonable human being might have 1 to 3 beers to enter in a competition. And the last time I entered I think it was called the Michigan Brewers Cup. It was I think so. It used to be the Michigan State Fair comp, but the last time I entered that, I think I had 34, 36 beers in that competition, maybe 38, something like that. It was through some visibility that I gained from doing that stuff. That's what gave him my leg up into the industry. So yeah, no formal training. And it's just been learning and my skill gained by actually doing it, right? But I will say, I was talking to somebody recently, maybe it was on one of the podcasts, but I had a very professional approach even when I was brewing at home. And what I mean by that is I was like 100% serious, always trying to get better, and constantly grinding for new information, and yeah, pushing myself to get as good as I could. So yeah, that's kind of that, man. Appreciate the question, Vic. Next question comes from NB561 on YouTube. How long did you ultimately lay down this pastry stout? So this question is referring to I have a video on tiny barrel aging. I had these awesome little 15-gallon barrels from a distillery in Texas. And so it was really cool. What I like about that size is you can have a half barrel of beer and just transfer it into one of those things and then transfer it back out. So the sizing is pretty cool. So that's what he's referring to. Check that out in the playlist. That would probably either be in the tutorial technique playlist tabs. So check that out there. How long did you ultimately lay down this pastry stout in these small 15-gallon barrels? We talking weeks or months? And at what sort of ambient temp were they stored? These smaller barrels intrigue me and at the same time make me nervous about going overboard, resulting in an oak-tacular oak drink. By the way, I didn't read this entire question, prior. I just read the beginning and said, oh yeah, I want to talk about this. And I copy and pasted it. And I didn't realize you're going to say oaktacular oak drink, which is pretty great. So hats off, NB. But you do want to try working with these. So we kept those. Most of the beers that went into those barrels were in there for about 9 weeks. And then I felt as if they had enough spirit character. They do not need as much time as a traditional size bourbon barrel because the surface area is much greater. So you do not need as much time, and you can over oak those things quite easily. However, this big ridiculous pastry stout in there, I had a barrel aged raspberry and chocolate pastry stout that went in. The finishing gravity on it was bonkers. It was like 1060. So what's Plato on that? 15? No, maybe 15. 15 Plato. That was the final gravity on it, and it was still an over 10% beer. So there's a lot of lactose in it. And actually, I'm not going to try to like backpat or anything, but I think it's a really nice example of pastry stout. It's relatively a drinkable version of that style. All of the acidity that we use got from the real raspberry in there helps to lean out that massive amount of residual sweetness. But it's still a sweet beer. I mean, don't get me wrong. But that one stayed in a little bit longer. I would say we probably maybe had it in for closer to 3 months. But this is a situation where you want to be sampling. Okay. So sample as you go, but I would plan and maybe start tasting around week 7 in those 15-gallon barrels. If you have, I know there's 5-gallon barrels out there. If you're doing that, test sooner. Because again, the smaller that barrel gets, the more increased surface area you're going to be dealing with. So that's a thing. But I think those little oak barrels are a cool way of doing some quick turn stuff. What I would suggest is sometimes when you're laying beers down in barrels like that, you have this huge beer that you need the actual beer to condition out in. If you have a strong beer, but a beer that's still in its prime and doesn't need to smooth from an ABV standpoint, I think you can do some cool stuff with those little barrels and kind of have some quicker turnaround, pretty true to character, long-term bourbon barrel age type experience with. So yeah, I think they're fun. Check them out. I think they're definitely worthwhile. Appreciate the question, MB. Next question is from Marcos92 on YouTube. What are the gas quick connects you use? I have tried a few different airline connectors, but can never get stainless ones. Great question. We're referring to the tank. I have a video on it might have been on carbonation or different things like that, but it shows like the quick disconnects that I use on the CO2 side when I was at Cartridge. Those you can get from GW Kent. They have stainless steel quick disconnects there, both the male and female side of it. What I typically use is I use a triclover attachment. Wait, no, that's not true. Well, I do use that occasionally, but what they sell is they sell both the male typically to threaded like MPT or whatever that can go into like the outside of your carb stone. So the male side, and then the stainless female side as well that fits up. Typically, I think you might need to get your own threaded barb to go on the back side of that. So just make sure that you're buying the appropriate thread size and then appropriate barb size for the gas line that you want to be utilizing. I do believe they're on the smaller side. So most of the gas line that I was running like at Cartridge was like 5/16 or something like that. So, but yeah, you can probably also go up to 3/8 with it as well. But yeah, that is what I was using, and it was from GW Kent. I would also suggest that you maybe check out Fox Equipment. That's Fox Double X Equipment. And I know there's Brewers Warehouse and a few other different things. I would dig around a little bit. But yeah, I do know that my quick disconnects that I was using at cartridge came from GW Kent. Next question comes from David Copland on YouTube. I have a question. I'm struggling with plate chillers. How can you knock out with a plate chiller to fermenter without blocking the chiller? Can I mount a racking arm to the boil kettle so the whirlpool uh, whirlpool time? Oh wait, well, let me see how I hacked this question together because it was multiple. It was multiple things. Can I mount a racking arm to the side of the boil kettle? Okay, so I can pull clear wort off the top of the sediment of the kettle. Yeah, I mean those are all options, and I think you're headed in the right direction. First of all, you want to be making sure that you are using a kettle coagulant that will not always get you there. I've used Whirlfloc both at home and on the pro side, but there's various kettle clarifiers that you can get. I would encourage you to check that out. However, there's certain beer styles that it doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to have a large volume of sediment in your kettle, whether that be from malt and or adjunct and or a large hop volume going into your whirlpool or kettle. So yeah, I mean, you absolutely. So just so it's known, just so it's said, I would definitely recommend using a kettle coagulant after flame out, getting a reasonable whirlpool. Again, you don't need it like mega vortexing or anything like that. Get it whirlpooling and get it covered and let it give it 20-25 minutes, a half hour to settle, and see if that doesn't help. Try not to disturb the kettle if you do have like a side port, something like that. Depending on what kind of kettle you're working with, I do know a lot of different kettles. Some of the fancier ones have like a little rotating arm, like an L-shaped arm that goes in on the inside that functions as a racking arm. And so you can probably get like the attachments for one of those. So if you wanted to get like a little racking arm, I would look at one of the online homebrew side things. You might be able to punch a hole in your kettle, and then, but before you punch the hole, get the racking arm that you're going to be installing in it, and you do want to be able to make it go all the way and touch the bottom. But then if you rotate it, it should be able to go, to full 12 o'clock as well, right? And so that way you can rotate it. So when you start, what I would recommend is you start your transfer with the racking arm all the way up at 12 o'clock. And then when you're running off, I'm assuming you're using some sort of clear tubing, rotate that until you hit true or your stuff that flocks out, and then tilt it back up a little bit and run your clear wort off. But making sure that you're implementing both kettle findings and a reasonable whirlpool stand might also take care of what you're trying to figure out as well there. So anyways, that is my take on that, David. Good luck with the issue. A few things coming out of the chat. I'm a brewery. A friend suggested that crashing a beer down by a couple degrees every other day will clear out a beer better than instantly setting the controller to crash temps. Haven't noticed an impact. Thoughts? Yeah, that's. I'll just say right now, that's there's various thoughts on this, and I'm not completely sure. I did read some stuff that I'm trying to remember when it was talking about flocculation. Even various temperatures for various yeast strains. So it might be more yeast strain dependent too. But I wouldn't be able to drill down on that for you, unfortunately. Uh, Paul in the chat is asking about water backing. If you haven't seen my last video, Paul, make sure to get back and check it out. Within the last week, I have one on water backing. Maybe within the last 2 weeks. Go ahead and dig that one up and talk about it, and it's probably going to answer your question on that, because I do think you want to pre-boil to evacuate O2 from that water before you water back. Talks a little bit about what you might want to do on the water side as well. As far as water chemistry goes, yeah, I mean, you could keg up some of that, if I'm understanding correctly. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. He's asking if he could actually uh, fill some uh, fill some kegs with pre-treated carbed water. You would want it to be carbonated, pre-treated, pre-boiled, and then maybe by weight you could do that. So if you wanted to cut it by a third, you could fill it by third by weight with carbonated water, and then rack that beer on top for your light lager. That might be possible. That might be a little end around if you're tight on tank space. But check that video out, man, and see how it does. Homebrew 8629. I think I'm answering that question a little bit later. Yeah, I have that question later in the stream, brother. So I'll be on to that. Actually, I'll just do it right now, and I'll just drop it. Do you have any pH adjustment post fermentation? I experiment with this a bit in order to improve quality and also keep it safe in package. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that if I have both driven pH in beers down and pH up, but we're talking here specifically about food safety and things like that. So kind of keeping things under the 4-5 range for pH is great for shelf stability and great for food safety. So yeah, I mean, my take on it is I have done that. I have adjusted both with food grade lactic and food grade phosphoric acid. Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. I would definitely think pull a half liter or a liter of that beer and start dosing it down. And so maybe pull like 250 mils and then titrate with the acid that you want to use, mix it, and then start tasting and testing the pH of those mixtures and seeing what you feel like hits best, and then scale up. Maybe don't hit your full volume. Maybe dose it with 75%. And rack on top of that, mix it however you want to do it if it's on the cold side, and kind of go from there. See what it does for you. Maybe don't go whole hog instantly, and so you can kind of ramp your way up to it. But yeah, I think that's a great way of dropping pH to make sure your beer is in an appropriate range. Dude, it's not a duplicate question. You never know. So I pull most of the questions from. I have to try to maximize my time because this is not my day job, right? I have a day job, and I've got kids that I gotta try to be a dad to, and so usually what I do is a day or two before the live stream, I don't look at YouTube comments the whole month, and then I just look them up and I start copying and pasting them, all the questions that I can answer into that, and then culling stuff from my Instagram as well. So anyways, yeah, no, it's no problem. That's how I do my thing. Next question comes from Hector on YouTube. At what stage of your fermentation is the yeast harvested? Was there a selective recovery of yeast made? How did you handle trub? What about yeast cell counting, yeast viability of the recovered yeast? So this is in reference to me showing some of my yeast handling practices when I was working at Cartridge. And what I was operating with is I was operating with a yeast brink, a scale, and I did have a um, microscope. So I was able to do some cell counting, and I was just getting into doing some viability testing. I don't have a lot of experience with that. But what I was doing was I measured all of the variables that I could control for. So what I would do is whether it was my lager yeast or it was L3, London 3, those are the two primary strains, London 3 and then the Augustiner strain were the two primary strains that I had going in-house. I would get those beers cold crashed for 2 to 3 days, usually 2 days. The day before harvesting, I would blow down a little bit of the cone. But as I developed my practices, the bottom of that cone would already be blown off from my use of cone shaving. You can go back and check out some information on cone shaving in earlier videos, but basically cone shaving is just kind of gently dropping the bottom of the fermenter through the first couple days of fermentation. So getting all of the protein settle out, hop settle out, trub, if you call it that, dead yeast cells, popping that off. So I don't have to do as much of that because I've gotten rid of most of that early in the process. But you do want to make sure that you get that bottom portion, the cone out. Harvest from the center of the cone. And then I was harvesting by weight. I was doing 2.2 pounds per barrel for average strength worts, up to 3.2 for stronger ale worts. And then for lagers, I went up to 4.4 pounds per barrel. And north of there when it was a high gravity lager. Not that I did a lot of high gravity lagers. But those are the practices I used because that was what was available to me. I made them cold for the same number of days, used the same harvesting technique, and then typically I pitch same day. So anyways, that was kind of what I did. Just trying to eliminate any variables that I can control for. And that's what I did. So I appreciate your question, Hector. September and June, I might have to think on that. I will say this, and this is not pandering. The best comment I've had in the chat, I'm taking this a different direction because you asked what's the best question I've had in a live stream. I would have to think on that, but easily the best comment that ever happened in a live stream was in an early live stream when I mentioned that my wife and I have 6 kids, and none other than longtime channel superstar September and June chimed in. Adam makes beer more like Adam makes babies. Easily the best off the cuff comment in the chat. So tip of the hat to you, dude. Yeah. Next question comes from Michael Lane on YouTube. Hey, Adam, 2 questions. How fine of a crush are you grinding a coffee when you use it? At the pro level, how often are you checking to ensure that you're avoiding the infamous green pepper flavor when using coffee? I've seen a couple of things. Hey, Gnome, I didn't see in there. Gnarly Gnome is popping in and heard some of the hilarity. Also, shout out to Gnarly Gnome, a local beer scene legend here in the Cincinnati market. If you have not checked out his stuff, check him out on Instagram. His website, which I believe is just Google Gnarly Gnome. But they also have an event coming up. They have what I believe is becoming a yearly beers, booze, and bonks event coming up. So if you're in the Cincinnati area, check that out. It's like a football bowling game, basically. It's like they have 10 pins set up and you throw a football at knocking it over. Sounds like a hell of a lot of fun. And I know they're going to have a curated beer list for that. So give him a follow. He's got a YouTube page, Instagram. You can find him on Facebook, all that good stuff, The Gnarly Gnome. And if you are local enough to check out that beer festival he has coming up, you won't want to miss it. So the two questions, Adam does make children. The two questions from Michael Lane: how fine of a crush? I've always used Coarser Crush throughout my time, and sometimes I've done a blend of both Coarse Crush and Whole Bean. And how often are you checking to ensure the infamous green pepper or avoiding? It's my understanding that that's an oxidation thing. I was just talking to some people recently, though, that I know to be smart, and they have like a different viewpoint on it. And off the top, I don't remember what that is. So just for right now, I'm gonna have to do a little bit more digging on it, but it's good practice anyways. But just really try to double down on your oxygen practices, avoiding oxygen. I mean, you should be worried about that all the time with your beer, but especially when you're making coffee beers. And I've also heard, so the interesting thing is after coffee beans are roasted, there's a period of time where they will express CO2 out of the bean. And that is why there's that little hole in your coffee bag, so your coffee bag doesn't blow up, to allow that to off gas. So I've also heard of people leveraging that as well. So you should check that out and maybe get with your local roaster and see if you can get something that was relatively freshly roasted. That might be a great way to go, and then get it crushed and then get it into your beer. So yeah, those are some takes on the coffee side. But yeah, I have gone with the Corsa Crush, and then I'm always chasing down things on the oxidation side when it comes to the green pepper note that you can pull off coffee. So thank you for the question. September and June, have you registered for World Beer Cup on the 7th? And are you going to be in Vegas? Am I going to be in Vegas? I don't know, man. I know I would love to see you and the lovely wife out there. I don't know. That's a boss question. I do know that I'm going to be a smaller one. I'm going to be giving a talk at the Ohio Craft Brewers Conference in January. I know that's of no interest to you. September. That's in Toledo, though. It's not that far from you. But yeah, I'm gonna be at that conference. But if I'm going to CBC and World Beer Cup, I am not certain. And then you also know that you've gotten that green pepper and even hot character from Dunkin' Donut coffee. That's interesting. Yeah, dude, I would love to get, I mean, I'm always down for dinner with you two. You guys are the best. So yeah. I've always wondered what that hole in the bag was for. Yeah, Andrew, dude, that's what it's for, man. Yeah, I mean, you come here for the beer news, and you leave with borderline useless coffee information. So, but it's something you can impress your friends and family with. It's like stupid human tricks. Next question comes from the most menacing name I've ever received, Soul Flayer on YouTube. Hey, Adam, any suggestions for skincare routines? I do like this question, by the way. I like the aggressive tone of the username, and then the inquiry about skincare, which I just recently Dylan, who I don't know if and when I'm going to be cutting footage at work where you might see some of my current coworkers. But right now, I was getting raked over the coals by Dylan. He's this younger fella who is always pointing out how old I am. Actually, great guy. I'm working with it. I've got a great team over there, great people to work with. And he was busting my chops the other day because apparently my hands looked a little too dry. And he goes, we have lotion over there. And I'm like, take it easy, dude. But it's topical. Any suggestions for skincare routines after a long day of washing and sanitizing with PBW and Star San? Does your skin suffer? Yeah, man, we're getting into that season. And I don't know about all of you, but there's blisters that you work up from, not blisters, but there's calluses that you work up from clamps, different things like that. When you're in and out of water, sometimes chemical exposure all day, these sensitive boys can get a little chapped and cracked up, So I am a big fan of, obviously, making sure that you are rinsing chemical off your hands as often as you can, especially with, just light chemical exposure throughout the day. You want to get that stuff off because it'll definitely dry you out. I will really any hand lotion seems to be cool, but because I used to always get like a crack right here in this top knuckle on my index finger, and it would be right here where I would like always be doing clamps and stuff. It's a pressure point for that. But I would always it would always split right there. And so I would use, and the problem is that's where I have like a little bit of a callus worked up. And so it's some rough skin to split because it doesn't seem to want to come back together. But I'm a big fan of that. I didn't write down the name. Working Hands. I'm a huge Working Hands fan. So it's like I believe it's like a green, like plastic looking tin shape type thing. That stuff's awesome. Especially for like hand cracking and stuff because we're getting into the season for it too. So, and then the flip side is, and also not to sound like weird or that I'm like, parenting you or whatever, but make sure you're drinking that water, dude. Just in general, we're working pretty hard back there and stuff. And sometimes we think about it during the summer, but make sure you're keeping that water intake up. That helps as well when it comes to keeping that skin nice and happy. So Gnarly Gnome is a fan of the Cornhuskers as well. Another good option. Or Ye Old Bag Bomb. What else? We've seen what is the meaning of life, Adam Makespeare? Star Santa has made my fingerprint reader unreliable. I believe that. Yeah, and use gloves when you can. Use gloves when you can too. That is but I'm sure you work hard. I'm sure you work hard, no? Yeah, dang, September. This is you. That's a late in the question night. Meaning of life. That's what we might save that one till the end. We'll see. I might fumble around with that a little bit later. Next question comes from Ozan. I believe Yozan Yum Rukaya on YouTube. I think that's the second question I've got from you because your opening was the same as last time. Hi, Master. Have you ever used Philly Sour? If you have ever used, what are the best practices for Philly? Thank you so much. Now, I've got a handful of videos talking about this, Ozan, and thank you for the question. I think Philly Sour is a great option for when you do not want to be using traditional lactobacillus on the cold side in your fermenters, and you want to keep it off of the cold side of your brewing equipment. I think Philly Sour is a great option for that. It's a great option for quick sour beers or quick tart beers, and I'm particularly a fan of using the term tart when it comes to using this yeast strain. Because one, I think it sounds more, I don't know, it sounds more pleasing, more approachable to me, but that's just an aesthetics thing. But I think that it generates it does not generate a tremendous impression of lactic tartness. All right, I think it's a little more tart, or a little more gently tart, but there's great uses for that. There are ways to try to drive that, And off the top, one of the ways is making sure you have about 20% simple sugar or dextrose in your wort is a great way to do that because it will generate the acidity up front and it will do that with easy to digest, uh, easily fermentable short chain sugars. So getting a good slug of dextrose into your beer, that can be a good way to go to maximize the acidity that you can generate. I also believe that fermenting in the higher end of the spectrum of the fermentation range can help with that, and a higher pitch rate. And I might be mistaken on that, but dig into the packaging on it. But no, I think it's a great way to do that. And also, I think once you lay down a base of tartness, and I think you're going to be able to get into maybe the 3.6 to 3.7 range pH wise. I think there's no shame in if you taste that beer and wish you had a little bit more. I don't think there's anything wrong with hitting with a touch of food grade lactic acid. And some people might be screaming at me right now, but it's the same concept of having the real thing made by the yeast, or like using the real thing when it comes to a fruit beer. So using a whole bunch of raspberry and then feathering it with a light amount of high quality natural raspberry extract to actually lift the nose. Sometimes people in our industry are a little allergic to that idea, but I've got news for you. They're all using it. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe they're not telling you, but the super majority of people are using that product anyways. So yeah, that's what my take is with that yeast strain. And give it a shot, man. I think it's I think it's an interesting little product. So next question comes from K Daddy on YouTube. Hey Adam, another informative video. Thank you very much. I set up a short distance recirculation rig using a small tops flow pump and low oxygen permeability tubing attached to the bottom of my conical and circulating back up into the racking port. So you're recirculating your fermenter. I ferment under pressure and purge the recirculation pathway with CO2 before starting. That sounds beautiful. My assumption is that in a positive pressure environment, there's little to no chance of O2 entering the space via the pump. Do you think I'm correct in this thinking? So I do think, by and large, you're correct in that thinking. What you always want to do is you want to be thinking about the integrity of your pump. Okay, so how good your seals are. Is it regular? Is it rated for the temperatures that you're using, the pH of what you're pumping, different things like that, because you can't have oxygen ingress from your pump. And you can have oxygen ingress from all of your connection points. So anytime you have that flexible tubing that is going over a barb, and there's a connection there, that can be a location. Even if you're looking at a triclover connection, you can have ingress there, right? So just try to be smart with it. But yeah, I mean, it does sound like you have a lot of the things checked off when it comes to that. I'm not familiar with that particular pump, but yeah, it sounds like a good idea. One way to potentially make that even more gentle, because it sounds like you're coming in the racking arm and just potentially shooting the beer back down onto the surface, and I can see that kind of like rousing the surface and potentially generating foam. One thing that you might want to do is perhaps draw off the bottom of the tank and then into, it sounds like you have a conical, then going maybe back into the racking arm and having the racking arm pointed up. And so that way you're keeping everything below the surface of the liquid, and that might create less turbulence, which may be gentler on the beer and may help preserve those delicate foam producing proteins, which might improve the foam stand on your beers. So yeah, just a few things to think about when you're doing that. Appreciate the question, K Daddy. Okay, daddy. Uh, yeah, so this is a great that's one thing I realized. So Paul is a brewer's apprentice supporter, but for some reason there's not a star next to your name. I don't know, dude. That's not something I grant. Normally that's just and how long have you because you've been one too, right? At least as of like last month, even I think. Um, but yeah, just so you know, even if it's not listed next to you, every time I read your name, I see it there because I see you. And also, Paul, I'll tell you this: nobody gives me intro questions. Nobody gives me nicknames like you do. I've never been called Adsy before, and I've been on this earth for 46 years, dude. I've been called a lot of things. I've been called a lot of things. You can believe that, but never Adsy, dude. So I mean, one of those dudes from down under, just dropping those nicknames, you know. Next question is from September and June. US 05, what you got? Brewed an Imperial Stout with it. Did I make a mistake? I think I think using dry yeast for really big beers when you need because you need a really big cell count, right? And a lot of times these yeast strains are going to be one and done. If you're beating the hell out of a strain, making a 9 to 12% beer, um, those things don't want to necessarily keep rolling, right? They might be in rough shape from a viability or petite mutant standpoint after that. And so you'll see a lot of times people using using a single use type approach with dry 05. I've had great success doing that. Dry 05, dry 04. I personally lean toward 05, even if I'm making a British type big beer, because sometimes I feel like um, uh, in big beers like that, you're going to get some ester expression and some higher alcohols, and you're going to get some complexity from the yeast just because they're working harder fermenting a larger beer. But dude, those dry yeasts are a great way to stack up a big pitch of yeast to ferment those beers. And they claim, especially Fermentus claims, that the way they handle their yeast now, there's no need for rehydration, blah, blah, blah. And so I've gone for it on that, and I've definitely done that. And I don't think that you're gonna have a huge issue if you hit your pitching rate, your temps are good, and I know your practices are solid. I think you're gonna be pretty pleased. A couple things that maybe you might see. That beer might go a touch drier than you expected, maybe not. I mean, you and I both know the numerous variables, whether it be mash temp, pitching rate, fermentation temps, ingredients, all that stuff, and makeup of your grist. All those things can come into play. But sometimes I've had those beers drill down pretty far, especially with 04. Yeah, I think a 1,000 gram pitch in 8 barrels was pretty robust. I mean, not overly so. I think I'm assuming you used a yeast calculator for it, but just off the top of my head, that sounds like a pretty reasonable number. If you want to throw the OG my way on that as well, yeah, I'm thinking that you're probably in a pretty good space for it. My guess is, and maybe we can chat about it soon. But my guess is that thing probably took off. And ambient temperature in the brewery matters though this time of year. I was just talking with Josh over at Cartridge, and he wanted to get a beer into diacetyl rest, ramp up a few degrees to help it finish out. And he was struggling to do that because ambient temperatures are so low this time of year. So just be aware of the ambient temperature in your brew house, because I know sometimes there's not the best HVAC in people's fermentation space. You have the ability to make beers cooler, but not necessarily the ability to warm them up. So if you do have the opportunity to maybe keep that ambient temp a little bit higher, to help it or at least to not be kind of forcing it to stay cool because of the exterior, the ambient temp, that might be a good way to go, because I know a lot of people like to pitch a little on the cooler side and then ramp up for some of these bigger beers. So just a few things to think about. Leave some fermentation in there, leave some sugar in there. And if you're ticking up your glycol, make sure you still have some fermentation left for it to knock out and to kind of help push up. So yeah, because I've had some issues in the past with things stalling, whether that be dry yeast or not. But September and June, as always, appreciate it. Andrew, I don't have experience with Imperial's Darkness, but if they list it as something that's a good option for that, I believe them. Next question comes from Rufus W. on Facebook. I was looking at some stout recipes and noticed that when it came to water additions, there were either very small acid additions or none at all. Can you help me understand that? Well, Rufus, you've come to the right place. This is stout season, baby. All right. Like right now, we've been realizing at work, it's one of those things where you're making a lot of yellow beer all year round. And then now there's the time of year where you're starting to make those dark beers. And then all of a sudden, the acid addition starts disappearing from the recipe sheet. Reason being is roast malt drives down on its own the pH of your mash. Also, many caramel malts at a higher rate than base malt can drive down the pH of your mash. So, being that darker beers, stouts, porters, brown ales, what have you, can have elevated levels of all of those things, a lot of times you might start seeing some issues with your mash temp or with your mash pH. Most people can just cut the acid addition out. Like in my area, you can just cut the acid addition out and still hit where you want to without having the acid addition because of that roast malt / caramel malt usage in the grist. But some people, it will push it down too low. So if you want to be hitting, because sometimes people like to get into the 5.4 range for pH on dark beers, and they're finding that they're hitting 4.9 or something like that. You can look at calcium carbonate, baking soda, unless I'm just air brain farting here and saying the wrong thing. But bumping that pH back up. Bump that into your calculator, your water calculator, and try that. Sometimes there are some issues with getting that into solution. I'm the kind of person that adds it as I'm mashing in. I know sometimes people like to add it to the water and try to get it to dissolve ahead of time. I don't have an issue with any of that. But my one buddy that does have to use baking soda when they're making stout, he just adds it, dry into the mash as he's mashing in, and it works appropriately. So yeah, Rufus, that is the deal, and you can and you can check that stuff out. It should help you out. That should explain it. Okay. All right, let's see. Next question comes from the baller Paul, Bondi Beach Beer. Hey, Adam, you cheeky devil. Like I'm saying, man. Paul keeps it real for me. I've never been called the cheeky devil, dude. At some point, I mean, you never know. You never know where the winds of life will take you. But I would love to hear those words in real time with the accent that I'm assuming that it's set in. I got another one for you. Our system has a sparge ring, but also Vorlauf port, which recircs the wort on a little plate, which gently spreads it over the grain bed on one side. Is there a reason I would use the Vorlauf port instead of just recirculating through my sparge ring? I would have thought the ring would distribute it more evenly than the port on the side. what is your thoughts? And kind of a little inclusion of, is hot side aeration a myth? So I mean, yeah, I've used systems like that, and I've kind of had that exact thought. And there is, it's kind of like a little like dentist mirror. It's like at a 90-degree angle, and the wort comes down onto it and it fans it out gently over half of the mash bed. I've seen a few. There's multiple different ways that can be set up. My guess is, I don't know, if you just run your sparge water through your sparge ring, you don't have to worry about cleaning it in the same way that you do your pathway for recirculation. That might be a bit of a dumb guy answer, but that's one thing. I mean, I don't think it necessarily hurts. The question about, hot side aeration, and is it a thing? I mean, I do think it is a thing. The question is how much of it, and how profound is the impact on your beer downstream? From my understanding, from talking to some smart people that are attached to smart breweries and having the capacity to measure these things, they have done both mashes or full hot side processes with tanks that are purged with an inert gas, and that there is a difference in color pickup, and there is there is a difference in Maillard reaction and in oxidation as well, but it's at such a low level that it's not. They didn't deem it worth changing their processes to play with. So that's kind of what I'm running with on that side. And yeah. So that's kind of my take with it. I don't think it's a myth. But if you have good practice downstream, especially on cold side, and trying to be gentle with your wort as you do move it from place to place, I think that should be the super majority of your concern. So, yeah. Next question, and this is one that I had to completely farm out the answers. And so this one is just Patrick on YouTube. Great videos, Adam. Not on the subject, but how many percent per year do you estimate your equipment loses in value? I'm doing research for a business plan. Cheers from Sweden. So, I am not an accounting guy or anything like that, but I did hit up some people that are a little bit smarter than me when it comes to that stuff. And here are a couple of answers, and I will not be able to expound on it. All right. And also, as far as taxes go, you're in Sweden. I'm not. Different things work different places. You do not want to be taking my advice on this. Obviously check through with an accountant on your side, but here's some big picture thoughts on it. I have a couple of answers. We depreciate it over 7 years for books purposes. Tax depreciation can be accelerated in certain cases. That was one person. Another person, usually it is depreciated over the first 5 years. If I remember correctly, it would mean that they would depreciate 20% of the value of the equipment each year. This would be for large brewing equipment. Smaller stuff like clamps, hoses, etc. should be expensed. So hopefully that's a good starting point for you. This is probably a question that will only ever live on the live stream, but that this one won't be cut up or whatever for short release. But yeah, yeah. Anyways, appreciate the question, Patrick, and thanks so much for watching. Next question is from Jeff Roach on YouTube. A lot of the New England hype breweries use systems like the Rolec DH Hop induction system, which utilizes an SBI shear pump to simultaneously introduce dry hop pellets directly into a stream of beer while recirculating the fermenter. The hops chamber holds pellets in an oxygen-free, pressurized environment utilizing carbon dioxide. Apparently, you get crazy fast extraction and can and sometimes can even overdo extraction. Yeah, man. Those are out there and they're super interesting. So really, that pump face will actually grind the pellets and then introduce it into the tank and recirculate it. So, like I know of people that will go ahead and dry hop and immediately start that circulation with that and get that thing ripping. And I've heard bigger places that do a lot of volume with those things really love that product. But it can be a situation where I have heard that hop um, that hop burn can be a bit of a bugaboo with that thing. So it might be something that you want to keep an eye on. I don't know how many people that have access to a pump like that, but breaking down those pellets, chopping them up, circulating them, that might be something to check out. But yeah. Anyways, thank you for pointing that out, Jeff Roach. Next question is from Scott on Instagram. It's been my head brewer's practice of raising the fermentation temperature of all beers near the end of fermentation. I'm very familiar with this practice on cooler lager ferments and fermentation where the grist is heavy in Pilsner malt. If, for example, I were fermenting a 1064 IPA with London ESB yeast at 68F, would it be necessary or recommended to raise the temp near the end of fermentation to get the most attenuation out of that strain? Now, first of all, how do I want to say this? I think it's great that you are asking questions, but I would encourage you to have open conversations with your brewer. And this is not what I'm saying is happening here, but I can see sometimes a brewer maybe getting defensive because we all have our weaknesses if they're being questioned with certain practices. But anyways, that's just a side note, and I appreciate the question, and it's all in the way that it's handled. But yeah, I am not familiar with obviously not obviously, but warming up lager ferments toward the end for diacetyl. That's pretty traditional. And where it's heavy in Pilsner malt, I've not heard that. But ramping up ale fermentations is also something that you can do. I don't know if it necessarily toward the tail end of fermentation, if I didn't mention that. I do know that it will help speed up the process of finishing out and cleaning up the beer, reabsorption of diacetyl and other fermentation byproducts that are still consumable by the yeast. And so it can help the yeast finish out. I don't know if it necessarily makes it go drier, but it can help it stay. It can help it stay rolling. And I would say especially in some British strains, because those British strains can have a tendency to maybe kick a little bit more diacetyl. And so ramping that up into the low 70s during the last, maybe 2 Plato, 8 points of your fermentation, the last 15 to 20% of your fermentation, that is an absolutely acceptable practice and pretty universal, I would say. So I wouldn't see there being any issue with that. But Brad, I appreciate the question, my man. I'm not out of my magic coffee just yet. Next question is from Jason on Instagram. Hey man, love the YouTube channel. Wondering if you can give me some insight on working with puree. Never used them until a few months ago. I made a watermelon sour and a strawberry cream ale. Watermelon sour flavor was fantastic, but the beer picked up zero color and the puree was bright red on the bottom of the keg. It had a reddish tint to it. I also got zero color or flavor out of the strawberry. Both from the same company, both pitch secondary fermentation around 60. Any tips would be great. Thank you for your time and keep up the great work. Jason, so it just so happened that you selected 2 of the most subtle fruits that you can work with in beer. Both watermelon and strawberry are very, very, very subtle, and you have to use a ton of them. Now, that said, I would always say, and if you're listening to the stream earlier, I would always look at trying to maximize by using the real product and a high quality TTB approved natural extract to be able to lift the aromatics. But we're talking about another issue here. It's not just intensity of flavor, but it's also color contribution. So some of these fruits that we're talking about using are not going to impart the color that you expect. There's a couple of different ways you can go. You could go with some fruit concentrates that would also be blended with potentially some colorings that would help bring that color. If you want to go in a different direction, something a bit more natural, and you want to like layer things in, if you wanted to layer in something like hibiscus on the cold side to drive some red or really anything that can bring some of that color, think about pairing those two things up. I do know that people use things like some sort of beetroot extract. My concern with using that would always be pulling the earthiness that you can get out of beets, which to me is not necessarily pleasant. But it is what it is. So there's a couple of different options there, and I would look into that. And I think especially when you're using really subtle fruit like that, yeah, that can be that's a tall order from the get-go. So look for potentially using some fruit that is more aggressive in its in the natural flavor that it has. It's more intense, something that brings more color to the table. Think about potentially concentrates if you are of that ilk. And then some of the other natural ways that you can color a beer as well. So that would be my suggestion to you, Jason. Doug on Instagram, what should the pH of my wort be before pitching the yeast? I would say typically you're going to see pHs in the low 5s to high 4s prior to pitching. But this will be a bit yeast strain dependent, but let's keep going. And he said, so awesome for you to respond, making a blonde ale with noble hops and Lutra yeast. And I can't, because he cannot control fermenter temperatures. So using a Kvike strain like that is a good idea. My last batch had a pH of 6.2 after the boil. I took a pH reading again with 15 minutes left in the boil, and it was at 5.3. I added Fermax as a yeast nutrient, so that might have affected the pH. And I responded, that's a pretty big pH swing. So I expect to see a tenth or two drop during the boil. And I doubt that the nutrient addition is something that pulled down your pH like that. And then I asked if he typically has a full point drop and during his boil. He said, I don't know, as I just started to take more pH readings throughout the brewing process. I was only checking the mash pH prior to this. I used Cervomyces nutrient this last brew I did, and the pH was 5.2 after the boil. That's super normal. Still fermenting, so we'll see if there's any difference as I made the same recipe as before. Thanks again for taking your time, as I'm sure you get a billion questions. I subscribe to your YouTube channel, and I love it. How do I submit a question for you on your channel? As always, hit me up on Instagram for questions, or just DM me on Instagram, or just put questions into YouTube comments, and that's how I see them. So, but getting to this, so yeah, big picture, I'll typically see a kettle full pH around low 5s, 5.2, 5.3, and then I will see end of boil pH, 5.1, 4.9 to 5.1, probably more usually in the 5.1 range. Yeah, my guess is if I had to guess, you might want to be checking your pH meter or making sure that you have high quality pH strips. because all those other measurements sound right, but that one measurement seems real off. The 6.2 seems really off. So make sure that you're calibrating your pH meter. If you are using test strips, make sure that they're like, I don't know, good or right, or double check it. I'm going to assume you're using pH meter here. So just make sure you're calibrating and staying on top of that. But that would be my gut. I don't think it's your pH meter, and you should not be seeing any addition of yeast nutrient that would be dragging down your pH like that. Next question comes from James on Instagram. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. It's a cool system. So this is a fellow that was asking me some question about going from the home side to the pro side. It's a cool system. It's basically a twin vessel system. This is the pro side equipment, which I currently brew on. So not much should change that way. But how does hop utilization change from a home brew system to a bigger system? And if I'm doing a hop regiment for hazy at home, being 10 IBU at 60 and 20, then 4 grams per liter of a 20-minute Whirlpool edition. Should I be altering or taking the cooling time into account for the 20-minute edition? And so congratulations on the new job. I'm looking forward to watching and listening to more of your stuff. James, thanks, man. You know, the biggest difference between pro side brewing and home side brewing is the scale, particularly in the way that it works with hop utilization, in the way that I'm going to have hot wort in the fermenter for usually far longer than you do at home. If you're using a plate chiller at home, or if you are using an immersion chiller at home, you can crash that thing down far faster than you can a 5, 10, 15, 30 barrel volume of wort. So that wort that you hit with a Whirlpool edition, the supermajority is going to be hot for much, much longer. Just as a rule of thumb, on a 15 barrel system, I always calculated Whirlpool editions as 20-minute editions when it comes to my hop calculator. So that's how I would input it. When I'm using Beersmith, though, I use Beersmith right now for my recipe calculations. You can go to Whirlpool hop and then say at what temperature for how long. And I think that does a good job of figuring out the utilization for you. So that's what I would recommend. That's the primary thing. And so I would be putting this into something like Beersmith. And you will be getting maybe, you will be getting more contact time. So you will be getting greater hop utilization depending on how much longer that wort is staying hot on hops. So yeah. Big Daddy, hashtag Big Daddy Addy, coming from Gnarly No, man. Yeah, right. Chic, welcome, howdy. Sometimes when I see people in here, I'm wondering who all it really is. Gnarly Gnome, Andrew, you've got to see some of the stuff Urban Artifact is doing with dehydrated fruit. It's insane, expensive, but insane. Yeah, Urban is doing really, really wild stuff. They do a ton of stuff with fruit. They do dehydrated fruit. They do a lot of hand processing and pasteurizing of their own fruit in house. They're doing some wild things on the fruit beer side, on the tart fruit beer side of things. So if you have not checked them out, you definitely need to. Lake Moran, welcome very much. Welcome, man. You're welcome very much. Just catching up. Thanks, Heats, for answering the question earlier, Adam. Much appreciated. You got it, brother. You know how we do. Again, pardon for all the coughs. I swear all day, like, I don't know, this cold that I have, and my wife has been sick longer than me. I got over it pretty quick, but it's like lingering. So anyways, yeah. Next question comes from Homebrew. Oh, we already got that one for you, brother. We did that one earlier, so you're good to go on that. But next question from Lager Than Life on YouTube. When hops have a lot number, is that a plot of land that the hops come from, or a batch number related to the pellet production? My understanding is the lot number is far more related to the hop crop itself. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see large bales of whole hops compressed. And it would be my understanding that that is a particular lot of hops, because that is what is going to be ground together and then pelletized together. And so, yeah, it's going to be more related to that. Kind of the things that you want to be looking out for with this is because we have had some questions around this. You do want to be making sure, like if you're in a production setting and you're running your Citra and you're going from one crop year to another, or one farm to another, or one lot to another, not only can you see differences in alpha acid, which is, I think, something that's relatively well known, but also you can have changes in a lot of other things, how those hops were processed. Some might be more prone to hop creep than others. Some may have different aromatic components. So yeah, those are definitely some of the things to be looking for when it comes to the whole hop lot number, to be keeping track of as you're doing this stuff. Andrew, do you send your water for analysis regularly at the pro level? I've tried to do that, like if I'm on my game 3-4 times a year. But yeah, it's pretty important. I need to get to the bottom of the water profile that I'm using right now at Sonder, because the stuff is pretty bulletproof. We have to do way less with the water than I did at Cartridge, and it's crazy because they're very close to each other proximity wise. But I think they might be on that P&G water. We're close to P&G. So yeah, from a buffering standpoint, it's way easier to work with. We don't have to adjust sparge water pH, which I definitely would have had to do. Like my final runnings pH is still so low. It's the same thing that it would be if I adjusted the sparge water pH, and we don't do anything with it. So it's pretty interesting, and that rolls into September and June. Does Sonder adjust the whole of their mash water pH pre-mash? They don't have to touch it big. We don't have to touch it big picture. We'll use some calcium chloride, and there are some acid additions, but nothing on the sparge side. So yeah, and even light acid additions. I was using way more on a system half the size at Cartridge. So there's got to be some difference in the fundamentals of the water that I'm working with right now. So yeah. And Andrew, you mentioned for dark beers still need a lot of acid in my pale beers. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's how that works. That's how that works. Well, listen, I'm gonna go big picture here, and I'm just gonna I might talk a little nonsense for a couple of minutes, but I'm going to indulge somebody here. Hold on, can I? Paul, you've had that question, and I need to do some work on it, man. The ascorbic acid question. I'm not super familiar, and I need to do some work on it, dude. So I will try to do that. But let's see. Where was the question? Andrew asked, where do your spent grains go? Landfill, farmer? I used to spread mine in the front yard, but my wife doesn't let me do that anymore for obvious reasons. Yeah, you can make some stank soup out there in the yard. For us, it's a farmer rolls through daily. So we don't even go overnight or anything like that. That's really the best case scenario. They come in and snatch that stuff before it starts to smell like vomit and gross baby stuff out there. What's up? What's up? All right. We're gonna wrap with this one. Every time I watch your live stream, it makes me want to make big. It wants me want to make beer. Gnarly gnome, appreciate it, dude. That's cool. Once we get settled in, you'll have to stop out to maybe we can set up a time for you to stop out to the pub here. We're just getting past the anniversary today. And we're kind of hitting we're ramping down a little bit for the production side of things for a little bit of the slower season. So schedule should be a little easier on my side. So we should hit me up and we'll get a time to grab a beer together. Yeah, September. I'm gonna grab some food after this, and I'm gonna grab some food after this, and then I'll give you a ring after that. But yeah, no, let's make that happen. Let's put one back here as we move into the holiday season. All right, man. Last thing, and I'll finish big picture with it. Whether it was tongue in cheek or not, September and June asked meaning of life, and I'm mostly gonna talk on some stuff that I've been thinking about lately. I talked about it earlier in the stream. The transition to Sonder has been a challenge. It's been great. And I just wouldn't talk about this stuff if it were something otherwise. So don't think I'm just saying these things because people can find out what I said because I'm saying it on the internet. It's been great. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Chase, both as a brewer and as a person. I think we have a great team there. I've been treated very well. I think they're doing a lot of good things over there, and I'm very happy to be there. The challenge has been having to learn new things, feeling like I should be better, that I should know more, that I should be more proficient, all these things. So yeah, meaning of life. I'm going to nutshell it right now with that stuff kind of in the lens. One, I think we need to accept challenges readily. Life is full of them. We can hide from them. We can medicate over them in various forms. But the best thing for us is to seek them out and work through them. This isn't like some tough guy thing. I'm not saying like this guy on Instagram that was getting salty with me a while back, telling me to pull my panties up and stuff like that. This isn't like one of those things, but I do believe that we're made of stronger stuff than sometimes we think. And you can see that in evidence. Like, look back in history, man. Like, there's been wild stuff, and people have risen to the occasion, right? So just taking it down to a less dramatic, more day-to-day thing. Challenge yourself to get better. When you feel the uncomfortability with something, like for me, whether it be with Ecos here or this, that, or the other thing, when you find that thing, examine it and then chase it. If you're constantly comfortable in your work life, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're probably not growing. And I think you owe it to yourself and the other people around you to continue to grow. The offshoot of that is on the personal side is I think we are built to serve each other. I think we're built to live outside of ourselves. I think our culture right now is constantly. There's a camera, 2 feet away from my face. There's constantly a camera in our faces, right? In today's day and age, and it can make that challenging because it's very easy to always have ourselves front and center when it comes to that. But I think the more we step out of ourselves and actually think about other people, man. I think those are some of the things. My beautiful wife is so excellent. And she's been so amazing over the last. I've been with her for 25 years, I think, including dating. And that's been one of the things that she has gently brought out of my spirit over the years is just stop being so worried about yourself and see the beautiful things that are around you. And for me, it's my family, you know. And that's a way that I've grown. When I was a younger man, I was far more concerned with my pardon me, far more concerned with my career and successes I was having in the workplace than acknowledging that I have a house full of beautiful people that think the world of me. And that's a little bit embarrassing to say out loud, but I mean, end of the day, that's where it's at. It's our loved ones. And I think more often than not, I was talking with a friend today. I think it's easy to isolate all of the scary things that are out there, X, Y, and Z that are making our life more difficult. But the older I get, the more I realize that the monster's not out there. The monster's in here. And it's much more an issue of getting out of your own way, and putting yourself aside. So anyways, I got to tell you, I'm very, very grateful. Once again, Homebrew 6829 just gifted 5 Adam Makes Beer memberships to folks in the chat. Thank you so much for the support. I tell you guys, it's really a wonderful thing. I appreciate the support so much. I'm doing a lot of work on the channel. Like right now, I don't have in brewery content coming out, but it's in part because this thing that I'm doing here is not my primary job. And at my primary job, I gotta knuckle down and really, really focus. There probably will come a time where, whether it be I can do that stuff on weekends or after work, we'll see. But there will be some in brewery content coming up. But the channel's evolving, with doing like the podcast angle on it too, and kind of feeling my way through that stuff. So I'm just so grateful for your support always. And it's not just the financial. The financial stuff is beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't even done my YouTube taxes stuff yet. So like I'm accumulating the donations and stuff. I need to talk to my buddy to figure out how to do it. But like, the fact that you're here, the fact that you're in the chat, the fact that you watch the videos, that you hit like, that you share it with other people, it's incredibly humbling, and it fills me with a great sense of gratitude. So this isn't even Boost talking, you guys. So yeah. Anyways, I wish you well. We're rolling into the holidays. It can be a rough time for some people. So be good to yourself, be good to others. Remember, I will be talking to the illustrious Big Josh Halpert, Josh Toft, head brewer at Cartridge Brewing, a little later this month. We are waiting to nail down a specific time to make that live stream work. Again, it should be a magical one by firelight. We'll see. We're setting moods, baby. We're drinking porter. You're going to see Josh and I in our natural environment. We've had many a beverage over that same fire the past year and a half. So it'll be kind of a little behind the scenes as well. But we have that coming up. Remember the Beersmith podcast, the Mo Hedjaw podcast. Check out their stuff. Give them follows online. Support that stuff, and also make sure to hit up Blickman. If you have not caught my live stream / podcast with Drew Barnes that I did a couple weeks ago, it's available both on podcast and live stream, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and the YouTube channel. I've been even cutting up some shorts of it for the YouTube channel. Dude, Drew's a cool dude, and we definitely get into some beer pertinent stuff. But we get into some managerial stuff and just some life stuff. Smart dude. And I wouldn't pop him off like that. I wouldn't say the stuff about him if I wasn't legitimately impressed. I think he's a good dude, and I think there's some valuable stuff in there. So make sure to check that stuff out and shoot him an email. Not everybody is looking to buy pro side equipment or even homebrew equipment, but I would really appreciate if you could take a second just to shoot them an email at that Pro Series at blickmanengineering.com, I believe, which I did at the cold read at the beginning, and just thank him for supporting the Adam Make Beer channel, the Adam Makes Beer channel, and everything like that. It is Pro Series at Blickman Engineering. No, thanks, man. Love you too. I'm glad you're at Sonder. Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, let's get a beverage here soon. Yeah, Ben's Brewing. I mentioned a little bit before. I do want to figure out some of the premium content stuff, some kind of, air quote masterclass type material. I'm working through that. My son might help me with a website build because I'm too broke to pay somebody else to do it, and I don't have the bandwidth to do it myself. But maybe that's an avenue for it. I'm figuring that out, so I'm open to taking some feedback on it. So, but as usual, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. This is a little bit longer one. We went over 2 hours today. So, you know what the deal is. I'll be seeing you again soon. Be good to your people, and have a great night. Bye.